because the 2021 revised bump kit is going to be, shall we say, quiet. Alrighty, how's it going everyone, and welcome to the 2021 revised bump kit video. If you don't know what a bump kit is, it's basically the gear that you have ready to go if you hear the proverbial bump in the night. So it has to be all staged, all set up, and you have to know how to use it. I did do a video like this back in 2020, that's what the first clip was from, and if you're interested in checking that out, I will leave that link down below in the description. Now we're also going to include my Minuteman loadout, because even though they're a little bit different, they're basically one and the same, so they're going to be in the same video. And both kits are going to include the gun that I have strapped across me right now, which is a 10.5-inch 300 blackout that I have suppressed. Now we're going to go over this gun in detail, but first I want to show you guys that it is indeed clear. And I knew that going into the video, and obviously I could have checked that before the video, but that's just how I keep all of my defensive guns staged. If I have to use this in the middle of the night, if I hear the bump in the night, I'm probably going to be waking up from a really, really deep sleep. Because most burglars, most people that attack your house, do so pretty early in the morning, like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So you're probably going to be sound asleep, and you're going to have to wake up really fast, assess a threat, and figure out whether that threat is worthy of lethal force or not. And I don't want to have the ability to just go, safety off, bang. I just shot my wife. I just shot my dog. I just shot my kid. I don't want to do that. I don't have a wife or kids, I only have a dog, but I still don't want to do that. I think you guys get what I'm saying. So take that into account. I know that there's a lot of people out there that think that extra tenth of a second that it would take for you to rack the bolt is the difference between life or death. But if that's really the difference between life and death in that gunfight, then I got bigger issues to worry about. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start talking about the gun itself. Like I mentioned, it's a 10.5-inch 300 blackout upper, and I got the upper from Radical Firearms. And even though it's a budget upper, I have had no problems with it. No failures to feed, no issues, no accuracy anomalies. It's accurate, it works well. It's a budget upper, but it works well for me. Underneath the nice and stylish handguard is a heavy barrel, and that's just a personal preference thing for me. I like heavy barrels with my 300 blackout. You can get whatever barrels you want with your 300 blackout, but this is just me. And a quick note on the handguard, if you watched my 2020 bump kit video, you would know that I like some geometric patterns on my handguards. I know that having M-lock all the way around is a lot more functional. I just like the cool factor. I like the look of it. Sue me. On the bottom of the handguard, we have a Magpul angled foregrip, which is pretty much as far forward as you can get it, if you can tell. And what that allows me to do is really pull the gun into my shoulder pocket to mitigate as much recoil as possible. Not that 300 blackout is too heavy recoiling of a caliber in the first place, but the more time it takes me to correct for the recoil of the first shot, the more time it takes me to get the second shot off. Not only that, but when I'm shooting at distance offhand, it really gives me a much more stable platform to get those shots off. Because if you've ever shot at distance, you know that stability is the #1 killer of accuracy. On the side, we do have my trusty old Olight PL Pro Valkyrie. I know Olight isn't the best. I would much rather have a Surefire. I get it, but it works for me.
All right, let's see how this four-man's night vision goes. No problem. Good so far.
I haven't had it fail, and I work this thing every single night. Every night, I got a dog over in the other room, and he likes to go run around a couple times. So every night, a couple times, when it's pitch black out, I go walking around with this light, and it works just fine. The pressure pad, no issues with it. And if it does fail, I do have a couple extra pressure pads as well. So I would imagine that that's the number one failure point is, you know, the little thin wire on top here. But hey, I do have extras if this does fail. At the end of the gun is a SIG SRD 762 suppressor, and I actually got this on my 21st birthday. Well, I filed the paperwork on my 21st birthday. It took 260 some odd days after I filed the paperwork for me to actually get this thing, but hey, who's counting, right? But it works incredibly well, and this is the direct thread cam. And the reason I went direct thread instead of QD is I want to put this on multiple different platforms. I want to put it on different guns, and I don't want to have that proprietary muzzle brake on each one of those guns. On top of that, it's $100 per muzzle brake. So I would have to pay for my tax stamp, pay for the suppressor, and then pay for another muzzle brake, $100 on top of those two charges every single time I would want to mount this on another gun. That's just not appealing to me. I understand that QD mounts do have their place. I'm not knocking them, but for what I do and my mission set, this works best for me. And I'll tell you what, this thing is quiet. When I'm shooting suppressed, I typically don't wear hearing protection. I don't recommend that necessarily, but this is definitely hearing safe with subsonic ammo. With supersonic ammo, it's basically about as loud as, I would say, a 1022. So not very loud. I mean, you're getting the port pop. Yes, you're getting the sonic boom downrange, but it's still really quiet. And this was my hunting setup for deer this season. I didn't fill my tag, but this was what was going to take down that nice buck up here, using my 125 grain SST hand loads, which out of this gun with the 10.5-inch barrel is going, drum roll please, 2,300 feet a second. 2,300 feet a second, 125 grain SSTs from Hornady. Oh yeah, that'll do some damage, all right. But with this round, and I did test this ammo out of this suppressor without hearing protection, and once again, it was just about as loud as a 1022 unsuppressed. So very quiet. I'm very impressed with the suppressor, and no, I haven't had any issues with it walking off. After about the first 10-15 shots, I'll just tighten it up, and typically that's all it takes. If I'm shooting a long string of fire, like more than 100 to 200 rounds, I'll just tighten it after every 100 rounds. It's not that tough, and I keep a welding glove in my shooting kit just because I want to tighten this up while I'm shooting. If you do that, if you keep in mind that it is direct thread and not QD, and that every once in a while you just gotta boop, you're good to go. You don't need to worry about a baffle strike. The bolt carrier group inside here is a full auto profile from Aero Precision. It's nothing too fancy, but it works well. Once again, no misfires, no failures to feed, no issues with it. And I'm not going to take it out of here to show you because it is absolutely filthy. I typically don't clean this gun. You just lube it and keep going. But it works well. I haven't had any issues with it. It just runs, once again, No problems with this gun at all. The optic on top is a SIG Romeo 5, and I'm not sure which specific model. It's the one that has the option of just the dot or the circle dot. And even though I like having the option of the 65 MOA circle dot, I just don't use it. I always have it on the little dot setting. Now, one of the questions I had getting this optic is just how little motion does it take to turn it on? Because if you know about the Romeo 5, you know that they're motion activated. And I was worried that having my dog Sven run around and bounce everywhere would be enough to turn this thing on. So what I did is I set my gun up and I did some jumping jacks. After a little while, I went back to check on it and the optic wasn't on. So I figured that's enough and Sven can go and bounce as much as he wants to. Now, if you live next to some railroad tracks or next to a freeway or something and your house is vibrating a lot, you might want to go into a gun store and test it out. I was willing to take the chance because Sven doesn't make the house shake too much, but you never know. Situations are different. On the back here, I do have an SB tactical brace. It's the SBA3. It's pretty ubiquitous when it comes to pistols. That's pretty much all I need to say about that. The charging handle, I forgot to mention, the charging handle is a Tomahawk charging handle. I had that on my 2020 build as well, and I just like it. It works well for me. The sling that I have on here is a Blue Force Gear, I think they call it the Vickers sling or something like that. I'm testing it out. I used to have a Magpul sling on here, but just seeing how this one works. Nothing to really say about it so far. It's a sling. Moving down to the lower. The lower itself I bought stripped, and it is from Ballistic Advantage. Now if you look closely though, it's an Aero enhanced lower. It's the same lower. This one was just $10 cheaper. And the only real difference is on the side here, rather than the Aero Precision A, you have a spade. So if you don't want the spade, you can spend the extra 10 bucks. If you don't care, you can save an extra 10 bucks, at least in my case. Inside the lower parts kit that I went with was a Spikes Tactical lower parts kit. Not that it really matters. The pistol grip on here is a Magpul, and that's just because I have my NFA paperwork inside here. Now the trigger is not a mil-spec trigger. It's pretty interesting, and if you're interested, follow along. It's a standard hammer with a standard hammer spring with a JP Enterprises 3.5 pound trigger spring and a flat face trigger from Bull Moose Tactical. You got all that? And what that does at the end of the day is it just gives you a real crisp, real clean trigger pull at around 3.5 pounds. Haven't put a trigger gauge to it, but feels about like that. It also gives you this real nice flat face trigger and all the reliability of the standard hammer spring. Because why would I want to lighten the hammer spring? The JP Enterprises 3.5 pound spring kit comes with a hammer spring. Why would I want to lighten the amount of force that hammer is hitting on the firing pin? That makes no sense to me. Lightening the trigger spring, that makes sense. On the side here, I do have a 45-degree throw ambi safety. I'm not sure what company made it. I will leave that right there down below. Now with that out of the way, let me swim out of this sling so that I can show you this beautiful trigger. We'll show you once again, we are clear. So we're going to take the gun off safe, and what I want you to watch is that there's basically no creep, barely any over travel, and it's just a nice clean break. I'm going to apply constant steady pressure, just like that. See the reset? Very short reset. It's also a bit of an assisted reset too. Let's try that again. Very nice trigger. Now if you're interested, once again, all this thing is right here is that's just the rounded part that you would put your finger against that you typically get in your mil-spec kit. Look up Bull Moose Tactical flat face trigger and you'll find this pretty easily. Altogether, it's about like a, I want to say $35, $40 trigger job, and it works perfectly. The tolerances are so much better than a standard mil-spec trigger, and I love the flat facing feel. So once again, this is all personal preference. get what you like. Alright, so now that I have all my kit on, let's start talking about the Minuteman side of things. But let's get a couple key things out of the way first and foremost. Number one, mission dictates gear. What I need to fulfill my mission might be different from what you need to fulfill your mission. So that leads us into the next point of what my mission is, and that would be defending my homestead and my property and possibly helping my neighbors do the same if a large enough threat arises. And that leads us into the third thing of how many magazines should we have. Again, this is only for me. For myself, I like to keep 1 in the gun, 2 on my waist, and 3 on my plate carrier for a total of 6. Now, if I was having to leave my main position, I would probably want to double up on that and throw 6 in my plate carrier for a total of 12. Now, since I am planning on fighting in one main location, it might be a good idea to have a centrally located ammo stash full of loaded magazines. A good example of that might be a 40mm ammo can with some special markings on it so you know which is the special can, and that should be stashed in a centrally located area that you could get to very quickly. Now on top of that, you might want to think about having some magazines stashed throughout your house, just in case you're faced with a home defense scenario instead of a life and liberty scenario. Because let's face it, a break-in is more likely than having a whole bunch of people marching down your street.
Get inside! Get in your house now! Let's go!
Light him up!
Go inside now!
Get inside!
Get in the house!
It's possible, but which is more likely. So, how many mags should you stash throughout your house? I would say probably about 8. And stash them in locations where you think you might have to fight. And locations like bedrooms, bathrooms, ones that have locks on the doors, those are the best. So, how much is that total? 12 magazines on your person, 30 in a central location, and 8 throughout your house for a total of 50. 50 magazines. Again, I'm not saying that that's what you need. I'm just saying that this is the theoretical world of Hayden over here. I'm going to ditch the gun since we already talked about it, and we're going to focus on the plate carrier anyways. The carrier itself is a Condor Cyclone, and I know Condor isn't the best brand out there, but if you're catching on with the theme, it's get stuff that works, not stuff that costs a lot. Money doesn't necessarily buy effectiveness. I have 2 other Condor products on here, both of the mag pouches, the triple AR in the front and the double pistol mags. Now I will say that these are not the best if you like to index your magazines, but for me, that's not something that I practice for, that's not something that I plan on doing, so that's not a concern of mine. If you are concerned with having to re-index your magazines really easily, I would recommend you try going with, I don't know if you can see that, but some S-Tac Kiwis or Kiwis, not sure how you would say it. But they work well. These are they have Kydex on the inside, but then they have MOLLE webbing on the outside. So they don't make noise like just standard Kydex mag carriers would, but they're also not flimsy like these are. So it's a good compromise. I just like having these on my plate carrier, mainly because they were cheap as compared with the Kiwis or Kiwis or whatever the fuck. So that's why I went with them, and they work fine for me. Going over here, the way that I index these magazines is I have them, so all I have to do is push the tab over and pull them up, kind of beer can style. For the pistol mags, I just have to rip up and pull out. So, pretty easy, just general mag carriers. One note on the S-Tacs really quick. When I first got them with the pistol side of it, I had a problem with my pistol mags literally popping out of the mag carrier. Now this was right after I had gotten it. I was trying them out. I was, doing my reloads and whatnot, and I was literally having my magazines jump out of my mag holder. So I got a hold of S-Tac, and they told me that if I wanted to, I could put an empty magazine inside of the mag holder and then inside of my oven, and that would warm it up enough to form it to that magazine. Now I never ended up doing that. I was able to just use it, and eventually it did wear in, but if you're having that problem, that might be an easy solution for you. Now the other stuff that I have on here is basically just sustainment and life-saving stuff. On the back, I don't know if you can see, but I do have a pouch back here, It can carry a water bladder. I don't have one in there at the moment because I don't have one at the moment, but that's where I would throw these 6 magazines if I needed to. And that's also where I would throw stuff like an MRE or any extra gear that I might need to. And I forgot to mention the last fighting tool on this plate carrier, that being my knife. And it's just a Benchmade dagger. I honestly don't know the specifics of it, but I call it a ring knife because it has that ring on top. And what that allows me to do, if I did have a threat, I could keep both eyes focused and without having to look away or think about it, it's in my hands ready to go. One more time. I don't want to look away. I don't want to think about it. I want to focus on the threat. And I'm back in the fight just like that. And I have that mounted on my IFAK here. And I'm not going to bust open to the IFAK because it's all nice and organized. And I don't want to mess that up. But needless to say, it has all the general IFAK fare in it. Couple chest seals, some compressed gauze, an MPA, a marker to write down what you've done, some gloves, alcohol swabs. It's just a general IFAK. Now I keep both of my tourniquets outside of this, mainly because this wouldn't fit 2 tourniquets, and I also don't want to mess around with the zipper trying to get a tourniquet out. So I keep one tourniquet in the pocket of my pants. If you haven't seen my EDC video, I will leave that in the description. And I keep one over here on the side of my plate carrier. And this is just in a little $15 Velcro pouch that I got off of eBay. And I'll show you how that looks. It just Velcros on here. You can see tourniquet just slips inside. And then when that gets folded down, that's not going anywhere. That's solid. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that about wraps things up. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, consider subscribing, leaving a like, or possibly sharing it with someone you think also might enjoy it. YouTube obviously doesn't do a great job of sharing this sort of content around, so I gotta rely on you guys for that, and I would really appreciate it if you would do so. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below in the comments. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Think for yourself, shoot straight, and I will see you next time.